Jake tightened his grip on the steering wheel as the old pickup truck sputtered and groaned. The engine made a sound like it was gasping for air, and then, with one final wheeze, it died completely. He pulled over to the side of the deserted road, muttering under his breath about how this night couldn't get any worse. Beside him, Emily sat quietly, her arms crossed against the cold. She glanced at him, her expression somewhere between annoyance and concern. "Well, that's just great," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "What now? Are we supposed to walk back to town in the dark?" Jake sighed and turned off the headlights, plunging them into near-total darkness. The only light came from the faint glow of the moon above and the occasional flicker of stars, peeking through the clouds. They were miles away from anyone, or so they thought. The small town of Willow Creek lay far behind them, its lights barely visible on the horizon. Jake reached into the glove compartment and pulled out a flashlight, clicking it on. Its weak beam illuminated the dashboard and part of the empty road ahead. "Relax," he said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. "I'll pop the hood and see if I can figure out what's wrong. Maybe it's just something simple." Emily rolled her eyes but didn't argue. She stepped out of the truck and stretched her legs, shivering as the cool night air wrapped around her. It wasn't freezing, but the temperature had dropped enough to make her wish she'd brought a jacket. As Jake popped the hood and leaned over the engine, poking around with a wrench he kept in the back, Emily wandered a few steps away, shining the flashlight along the roadside. There wasn't much to see, just dry grass, rocks, and the occasional tumbleweed rolling lazily across the cracked asphalt. But then she saw something strange. At first she thought it was a trick of the light. A shimmering distortion hung in the air a short distance away, like heat waves rising off hot pavement. But as she stared, the shimmer grew brighter, almost metallic, and began to take shape. Her heart skipped a beat when she realized it wasn't some natural phenomenon. It was a ship, a sleek, otherworldly craft hovering silently just above the ground. Its surface gleamed faintly, reflecting the dim starlight, and its design was unlike anything she'd ever seen. It looked like a cross between an insect and a machine, all sharp angles and smooth curves. "Jake," she called, her voice trembling slightly. "You need to come look at this." He straightened up immediately, dropping the wrench onto the gravel with a clatter. "What is it?" he asked, already hurrying toward her. When he saw the ship, his jaw dropped. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The sight was both mesmerizing and terrifying, like something out of a movie. Then, without warning, the ship descended lower, settling gently onto the ground with a soft hum that resonated in their chests. A section of the hull slid open smoothly, revealing a ramp that extended down to the earth. Two figures emerged, tall and slender, their forms encased in sleek black armor that reflected the faint light. Their heads were elongated, with large, almond-shaped eyes that glowed faintly. They moved with an unnatural grace, each step deliberate and precise. One of them carried a device that emitted a series of beeping sounds, while the other held what appeared to be some kind of weapon, a long, cylindrical object glowing with an eerie blue light. Jake instinctively stepped in front of Emily, shielding her with his body. His mind raced, trying to process what he was seeing. Aliens, actual aliens. This wasn't supposed to happen outside of science fiction. And yet, here they were, standing less than 20 feet away, staring at him with those unblinking eyes. The alien holding the device raised it toward them and pressed a button. A mechanical voice, distorted but understandable, emanated from the device. "We are explorers. We mean no harm. You will comply." Jake frowned, his protective instincts kicking in. "Comply with what?" he demanded, his tone sharper than he intended. "Who are you and what do you want?" The second alien tilted its head slightly as if studying him. Then it spoke again through the translator. "Your kind has been observed. We seek knowledge. Cooperation is required." Emily tugged at Jake's sleeve, whispering urgently, "Maybe we should do what they say. They've got weapons, Jake. We're not exactly in a position to argue." Jake hesitated. On one hand, she was right. They were outnumbered and outgunned. On the other hand, The way these creatures carried themselves set off every alarm bell in his head. They weren't asking politely. They were demanding compliance as if humans were nothing more than insects beneath their boots. "Look," he said slowly, keeping his hands visible and his voice steady. "If you want to talk, fine. But you don't just show up uninvited and start ordering people around. That's not how things work here." The lead alien, the one who seemed to be in charge, paused, as if processing his words. Then it took a step forward, raising the glowing weapon slightly. "Resistance is futile. Your cooperation is mandatory." Jake clenched his fists, torn between anger and fear. He hated being told what to do, especially by someone or something that clearly didn't respect him or his species. But before he could respond, Emily stepped forward, surprising him. She squared her shoulders and met the alien's gaze with surprising determination. "If you wanted cooperation," she said firmly, "you picked the wrong approach. Humans don't respond well to threats. Maybe try asking nicely next time." For a moment, there was silence. The aliens exchanged a glance, though their expressions were impossible to read. Then the lead alien lowered its weapon slightly, tilting its head again. "Interesting," it said, its voice devoid of emotion. "Your behavior is irregular. Most species submit without question." Jake smirked despite himself. "Well, we're not most species." The alien regarded them for another long moment before stepping back. "This encounter is noted. Further, interaction will occur." With that, it turned and walked back up the ramp, followed closely by its companion. The ship's hatch closed with a soft hiss, and within seconds it lifted off the ground, ascending silently into the sky until it disappeared entirely. Jake let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. "What the hell was that?" he muttered, running a hand through his hair. Emily shook her head, still staring at the spot where the ship had been. "I don't know. But I have a feeling this isn't over." They stood there for a while longer, the enormity of what had just happened sinking in. Neither of them spoke, but both knew one thing for certain. Life in Willow Creek, and maybe the whole world, was about to change forever. The next morning, the quiet town of Willow Creek buzzed with whispers. Jake and Emily had barely slept after their encounter with the aliens, and by sunrise they decided it was time to tell someone what had happened. They drove back into town. As soon as Jake managed to fix the truck after a few hours of tinkering and plenty of muttered curses, and headed straight for Ben's farm. Ben was a burly man in his late 40s, known for being practical, level-headed, and tough as nails. If anyone could help them figure out what to do, it was him. When Jake and Emily arrived, Ben was already outside feeding his chickens. He squinted at them as they pulled up, dust swirling around the tires of the old pickup. "What brings you two here so early?" he asked, leaning on his pitchfork. His tone was casual, but there was a sharpness in his eyes that suggested he already knew something was wrong. Jake hesitated, glancing at Emily before speaking. "We need to talk to you about something unusual." Ben raised an eyebrow. "Unusual how?" Emily stepped forward, her hands clasped tightly together. "We saw something last night. Something we can't explain." Ben listened intently as they recounted the events near the deserted road, the strange ship, the aliens, the demands for compliance. At first he looked skeptical, shaking his head and muttering, "This sounds like one of those sci-fi movies my nephew watches." But as they described the details, the glowing weapon, the translator device, the way the ship disappeared into the sky, his expression shifted. By the time they finished, his jaw was set in a hard line. "You're serious about this," he said finally, his voice low. It wasn't a question. "Dead serious," Jake replied. "And we don't think they're done with us." Ben didn't respond right away. Instead, he turned and walked over to the porch where he kept a weathered shotgun propped against the railing. He picked it up, checked the chamber, and slung it over his shoulder. "If what you're saying is true, we need to warn the others." Word spread quickly in Willow Creek. By mid-morning, a small crowd had gathered at the local diner, which doubled as the town's unofficial meeting place. The diner's owner, Sarah, a young woman with curly brown hair and a no-nonsense attitude, had agreed to let everyone use the space. She stood behind the counter, arms crossed, watching as people filed in. Some brought rifles or shotguns, others carried tools like hammers or axes. Everyone looked uneasy, exchanging nervous glances and hushed conversations. Jake and Emily stood at the front of the room, explaining everything again to the group. When they finished, silence fell over the room. No one spoke for a long moment. Then Sarah broke the tension. "So what do we do now?" she asked, her voice steady despite the uncertainty in her eyes. Before anyone could answer, a loud hum filled the air. It started faintly, almost imperceptible, but grew louder and more intense until it vibrated through the walls of the diner. Everyone rushed outside to see what was happening. Hovering above the center of town was the same alien ship from the previous night, its surface gleaming in the sunlight. This time, however, it wasn't alone. Dozens of smaller drones zipped around it, scanning the area with bright red lights. One of the aliens descended from the ship using what appeared to be a beam of light. It landed gracefully in the middle of Main Street, flanked by two of the smaller drones. The townspeople instinctively backed away, forming a loose semicircle around the creature. Its glowing weapon hung at its side, but it made no move to attack. Instead, it activated the translator device once again. "You have been observed," the mechanical voice announced. "Your resistance is noted. Compliance is still required." Ben stepped forward, his shotgun resting casually on his shoulder. "Compliance isn't something you demand," he said, his voice calm but firm. "Not around here." The alien tilted its head, studying him. "Resistance will result in consequences." Jake moved to stand beside Ben, his fists clenched. "You keep saying compliance, but you haven't told us what you want. What does that even mean? Are you planning to take over our town? Our planet?" The alien paused, as if considering the question. "Information, resources. Subjugation may follow if necessary." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Subjugation. That single word sent a chill down everyone's spine. These creatures weren't just explorers. They were conquerors. And they clearly underestimated the people of Willow Creek. Sarah stepped forward, her hands balled into fists. "You think showing up with your fancy toys scares us? You've got another thing coming." The alien raised its weapon slightly, aiming it at her. "Threats will not alter the outcome." But instead of backing down, Sarah grabbed a nearby rock and hurled it at the alien. It struck the creature's armor with a dull thud, leaving a slight dent. The alien froze, clearly unprepared for such defiance. The crowd erupted into cheers, emboldened by Sarah's act of rebellion. "Is that all you've got?" Ben taunted, raising his shotgun. "Because we've faced worse than you." The alien's posture stiffened, and it turned to address the crowd. "Your actions are illogical. Resistance is futile." "No. What's illogical is thinking we'll roll over because you showed up with shiny gadgets." Jake shot back. "If you wanted cooperation, you should have tried asking nicely, instead of throwing threats around." For a moment, the alien seemed unsure how to respond. Then, with a flick of its wrist, it signaled the drones to retreat. The larger ship began to ascend, disappearing into the sky as quickly as it had arrived. The townspeople watched in stunned silence, unsure whether to celebrate or prepare for another attack. Once the ship was gone, Ben turned to face the group. "All right, folks, listen up. Whatever these things are, they're not going to leave us alone. We need to be ready for them." "What exactly are we supposed to do?" someone asked. "They've got technology way beyond anything we've got." "That doesn't matter," Emily interjected. "We've got something they don't, each other. If we stick together, we can figure this out." Ben nodded approvingly. "She's right. We might not have their fancy weapons, but we've got brains and guts. Let's make sure they regret messing with us." Over the next hour, plans began to take shape. Jake, who had served in the military before returning home, took charge of organizing defensive strategies. He divided the townspeople into teams, assigning roles based on their skills. Some would patrol the outskirts of town, keeping watch for any signs of the aliens. Others would fortify key locations like the diner and the church, turning them into makeshift shelters. Farmers volunteered their tractors and trucks to create barricades while hunters offered their firearms and ammunition. Sarah, meanwhile, focused on rallying morale. She reminded everyone that fear wouldn't solve anything. "These aliens think they can walk all over us because we're primitive," she said, her voice ringing out across the room. "But they don't know who they're dealing with. We're survivors, fighters, and we're not letting them take what's ours." As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the town, the people of Willow Creek worked tirelessly to prepare for whatever came next. They didn't know when or if the aliens would return, but one thing was certain: they weren't going down without a fight. That night, as Jake and Emily sat on the porch of Ben's farmhouse, staring up at the stars, neither of them spoke. The enormity of what they were facing weighed heavily on their minds, but amidst the fear and uncertainty, there was also a sense of resolve. For the first time in years, the entire town was united, working together toward a common goal. And though the odds were stacked against them, they knew they had something powerful on their side: the indomitable spirit of humanity. "We'll be okay," Emily said softly, breaking the silence. "Won't we?" Jake glanced at her, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Yeah, we will. Because we don't give up. Not ever." Far above, hidden among the stars, the alien ship lingered silently, observing. Kyle, the lead alien, stared at the data streaming in from the drones. Humans were proving to be far more complicated than he'd anticipated. Their defiance puzzled him, but deep down, he couldn't deny a grudging respect for their courage. Still, orders were orders. Earth would be assimilated one way or another. Little did Kyle realize that humanity wasn't just fighting for survival. They were fighting for something far greater: their freedom. And as history had shown countless times before, underestimating humans was always a fatal mistake. The days that followed were filled with tension and preparation. The people of Willow Creek worked tirelessly, fortifying their town and preparing for the worst. Jake spent hours organizing patrols, making sure every corner of the area was covered. Emily used her engineering skills to rig up makeshift alarms using old car parts and scrap metal. Sarah coordinated food supplies, ensuring everyone had enough to eat if the situation turned dire. And Ben led training sessions, teaching those who weren't familiar with firearms how to handle them safely. Despite the constant activity, there was an unspoken fear hanging over the town. Everyone knew the aliens could return at any moment, and, when they did, it wouldn't be with empty threats. The memory of the glowing weapon and the eerie drones lingered in their minds, a reminder of just how outmatched they were. But instead of letting fear paralyze them, the townspeople channeled it into action. They worked together, sharing ideas and resources, determined to protect what was theirs. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Jake and Emily sat on the porch of Ben's farmhouse, reviewing maps of the surrounding area. Jake traced his finger along a dirt road leading out of town. "If they come back, this is probably where they'll land," he said, pointing to an open field near the edge of the woods. "It's flat and wide enough for their ship." Emily nodded, her brow furrowed in thought. "We need to figure out a way to slow them down if they do. Maybe set up some kind of trap." Jake raised an eyebrow. "A trap? Against those weapons of theirs?" "It doesn't have to stop them completely," she replied. "Just give us time to regroup or retreat. If we can disable even one of their drones, it might throw them off balance." Jake considered her idea for a moment before nodding slowly. "All right. Let's talk to Ben about it tomorrow. He might have some suggestions." As they spoke, Sarah approached carrying 2 cups of coffee. She handed one to each of them before sitting down on the steps. "Any progress?" she asked, glancing at the map. "We're thinking about setting traps," Jake explained. "Something simple but effective." Sarah sipped her coffee, her expression thoughtful. "You know, my dad used to tell me stories about hunting coyotes when he was younger. He'd dig pits and cover them with branches so the animals would fall in. Maybe we could try something like that." Emily's eyes lit up. "That's perfect. We could dig trenches and cover them with tarps or plywood. If the aliens, Or they're drones. Step on them. They'll collapse. Jake grinned. Now we're talking. Let's get started first thing in the morning. The next day, the entire town pitched in to create the traps. Farmers brought tractors to dig trenches while others gathered materials to camouflage them. By nightfall, several deep pits lined the fields surrounding Willow Creek, hidden beneath layers of brush and dirt. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. Meanwhile, Ben took a small group, including Jake, Emily, and Sarah, on a scouting mission. They drove out to the abandoned gas station where Jake and Emily had first encountered the aliens, hoping to find clues about their intentions. The place looked exactly as they'd left it, desolate and eerily quiet. But as they searched the area, Emily noticed something strange, a faint trail of scorched earth leading away from the site. "What do you think caused this?" she asked, kneeling beside the blackened ground. Ben crouched next to her, examining the marks. "Looks like some kind of energy weapon, probably from their ship." Jake frowned. "So they've been here since we saw them, testing things out, maybe, or planning their next move," Sarah added grimly. They followed the trail deeper into the woods until they stumbled upon a clearing. In the center stood a large metal device, humming softly and pulsing with a dim blue light. It was unlike anything they'd ever seen, smooth, seamless, and clearly alien in origin. "What is that thing?" Jake whispered, his hand instinctively reaching for the rifle slung over his shoulder. "No idea," Emily murmured, stepping closer cautiously. "But I don't think it's good news." Before anyone could react, the device emitted a high-pitched whine, and a holographic projection flickered to life above it. Images of distant planets flashed across the air, accompanied by scenes of destruction. Cities reduced to rubble, ships exploding in space, terrified beings fleeing for their lives. The message was clear. This was a warning, a demonstration, of the aliens' power. "They're showing us what happens if we resist," Ben growled, his grip tightening on his shotgun. "But why show us now?" Sarah asked. "Why not before?" "Maybe they're trying to scare us into giving up," Emily suggested. "Or maybe they're testing our reaction." Jake stared at the hologram, his jaw clenched. "Well, they picked the wrong crowd to intimidate." Without another word, he raised his rifle and fired at the device. The bullet ricocheted harmlessly off its surface, but the act itself felt symbolic. The others joined in, throwing rocks and firing shots until the device finally shut down with a loud crackle. The hologram vanished, leaving the clearing silent once more. "That won't stop them," Ben said, lowering his weapon. "But it sends a message. We're not backing down." Back in town, the mood was tense but resolute. News of the alien device spread quickly, and though some were frightened by the implications, most were angry. These invaders had no right to threaten their home, and the people of Willow Creek were determined to fight back. That night, Jake called a meeting at the diner. Dozens of townspeople packed inside, filling every available seat. The air buzzed with nervous energy as Jake stood at the front of the room, his face serious. "We've done everything we can to prepare," he began, his voice steady. "But we all know it's not enough. Their technology is too advanced and we're outnumbered. So tonight I want to propose something different." He paused, letting his words sink in. Emily stepped forward, picking up where he left off. "We need to capture one of them alive." The room erupted into murmurs of disbelief. "Are you crazy?" someone shouted. "How are we supposed to do that?" "We're not trying to hurt them," Emily explained quickly. "We just need answers. If we can get one of them to talk, find out what they really want, we might stand a chance." Ben nodded in agreement. "She's right. Knowledge is power. If we understand their weaknesses, we can use them against them." Sarah chimed in, her voice firm. "And if we fail, at least we tried. Sitting around waiting for them to attack isn't going to save us." After a long discussion, the group agreed to move forward with the plan. Jake, Emily, Ben, and Sarah would lead a small team to ambush the aliens during their next visit. They chose a location near one of the newly dug traps, hoping to catch the invaders off guard. When the aliens returned 3 nights later, the townspeople were ready. The ship descended silently into the field, its drones scanning the area as Usual. This time, however, the humans didn't wait to be confronted. As soon as the lead alien stepped onto the ground, Jake and his team sprang into action. Shots rang out, forcing the aliens to take cover behind their ship. Drones zipped through the air, firing beams of light that narrowly missed their targets. Chaos erupted as the humans darted between trees and trenches, using the terrain to their advantage. One drone flew too close to a camouflaged pit and plummeted into the trap, its body sparking and smoking as it hit the bottom. Seizing the opportunity, Emily sprinted toward the lead alien, clutching a length of rope. With surprising agility, she managed to loop it around the creature's torso, pinning its arms to its sides. The alien struggled fiercely, emitting a series of guttural sounds through its translator device. "Cease resistance," it demanded, its voice distorted but urgent. "Not a chance," Emily shot back, tightening the rope. The rest of the team converged on the scene, surrounding the captured alien. For the first time, the invaders seemed genuinely surprised. Their leader, the one named Kale, stepped forward, his weapon aimed directly at Emily. "Release it," he commanded, his tone icy. Jake stepped in front of her, raising his rifle. "Not happening. You want to talk? Fine. But it's on our terms now." Kyle hesitated, his glowing eyes narrowing. Then, with a flick of his wrist, he signaled the remaining drones to retreat. The ship lifted off the ground, disappearing into the night sky once again. As the dust settled, the townspeople gathered around their captive alien, unsure of what to do next. But one thing was certain. They had taken the first step toward fighting back, and for the people of Willow Creek, that was a victory in itself. The captured alien sat in the center of the diner, bound securely with ropes and chains. Its glowing eyes darted around the room, taking in the faces of the humans who surrounded it. The atmosphere was tense. No one spoke, but the weight of the moment hung heavy in the air. Jake stood closest to the creature, his rifle slung over his shoulder, while Emily, Ben, and Sarah formed a loose circle around it. Everyone else lingered near the edges of the room, watching silently. For a long moment, no one moved. The alien didn't struggle against its restraints, though its body language suggested restrained anger. Finally, Jake broke the silence. "All right," he said, his voice firm but calm. "We've got questions, and you're going to answer them." The alien tilted its head slightly, as if studying him. Then it spoke through its translator device, its mechanical voice cold and emotionless. "Your actions are futile. Resistance will only lead to your destruction." Jake smirked, unimpressed. "Yeah, we've heard that before. But here's the thing. You're the one tied up right now. So maybe it's time for you to start talking." Emily stepped forward, holding up a small recording device she'd scavenged from the gas station earlier. "We want to know why you're here. What do you want from us?" The alien hesitated, its glowing eyes narrowing. "Information, resources, compliance." "That's not an answer," Ben growled, stepping closer. His shotgun rested casually on his shoulder, but the threat was clear. "Why Earth? Why now?" The alien remained silent, its expression unreadable. Frustrated, Sarah grabbed a chair and dragged it across the floor with a loud scrape. She placed it directly in front of the creature and sat down, leaning forward, until her face was inches from its own. "Listen," she said, her voice low but sharp. "You don't get to come into our town, threaten us, and then act like you're better than us. If you think we're just going to roll over because you've got fancy toys, you're wrong." The alien regarded her for a moment, then tilted its head again. "Your species is primitive, weak. Yet you persist in defiance. It is illogical." "We're not weak," Jake shot back. "And we're not giving up. Not to you, not to anyone." The alien seemed to consider this, its posture relaxing ever so slightly. After a pause, it spoke again. "Your kind values freedom above all else, even at the cost of survival." Emily frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means your species poses a unique challenge," the alien replied. "Most civilizations submit willingly when faced with superior force. You do not." Ben crossed his arms. "So what? You're saying we're a problem for you, The alien didn't respond immediately. Instead, it glanced around the room, taking in the determined expressions of the humans surrounding it. For the first time, there was a flicker of something in its glowing eyes. Curiosity, perhaps, or even respect. Your defiance is unexpected, but it changes nothing. My orders remain unchanged. Jake leaned in, his voice hardening. Orders? From who? Who's in charge of all this? Before the alien could answer, a loud hum filled the air. Everyone froze, their heads snapping toward the windows. Outside, the sky lit up with a soft blue glow as the alien ship descended once again, hovering just above the rooftops. Drones zipped out of the craft, scanning the area with red beams of light. The message was clear. They had come for their comrade. Well, crap, Sarah muttered, standing up quickly. Now what? We can't let them take it, Jake said firmly. If they get it back, we lose our chance to learn anything. Agreed, Emily added. But how do we stop them? Ben tightened his grip on his shotgun. We fight, just like last time. The group exchanged quick glances, silently agreeing on a plan. They couldn't hold off the aliens forever, but they could buy themselves some time. Jake turned to the crowd gathered in the diner. Everyone, grab whatever weapons you have and get ready. We're making a stand. The townspeople sprang into action, grabbing rifles, pitchforks, and anything else they could use as a weapon. Within minutes, they had formed a defensive line outside the diner, facing the advancing drones. The alien ship loomed overhead, casting an eerie shadow across the street. As the first wave of drones approached, Jake shouted, "Hold your fire until they're close." The townspeople obeyed, their nerves stretched taut as the machines drew nearer. When the drones were within range, the humans opened fire, sending a barrage of bullets and makeshift projectiles flying through the air. Several drones exploded in bursts of sparks, crashing to the ground. Others swerved wildly, temporarily disoriented. But the aliens weren't done yet. Kyle, the leader of the invaders, descended from the ship, his glowing weapon aimed directly at Jake. "Release my subordinate," he demanded, his voice amplified by the translator device, or face annihilation. Jake raised his rifle, meeting Kale's gaze without flinching. "You want it back? Come and get it." Kale hesitated, clearly weighing his options. Then, with a swift motion, he fired his weapon. A bolt of blue energy shot toward Jake, narrowly missing him as he dove to the side. The blast struck the ground, leaving a smoking crater in its wake. The townspeople scattered, ducking behind cars and buildings for cover. Amid the chaos, Emily ran back inside the diner, where the captured alien still sat. She knelt beside it, her voice urgent. "Tell me how to stop them, please. If you help us, maybe we can find a way to work together." The alien stared at her, its glowing eyes flickering. For a moment it seemed to waver, torn between loyalty to its kind and the strange connection it felt toward these defiant humans. Finally, it spoke. "Their technology relies on centralized control. Disable the core system aboard the ship and the drones will cease functioning." Emily's eyes widened. "The core system? Where is it?" "In the lower deck," the alien replied. "But accessing it will require entry codes I cannot provide." "Then we'll figure it out ourselves," Emily said, determination flashing in her eyes. She turned and sprinted back outside, shouting for Jake and the others. When she reached them, she relayed the information as quickly as possible. "We need to get inside the ship. There's a core system that controls everything. If we can shut it down, we might be able to stop them." Jake nodded, his mind racing. "All right. Here's the plan. Ben, Sarah, and I will create a diversion while Emily sneaks aboard the ship. Can you handle that?" Emily hesitated for only a second before nodding. "I can do it." "Good," Jake said. "Let's move." The diversion worked better than expected. Jake, Ben, and Sarah launched a coordinated attack on the drones, drawing their attention away from the ship. Meanwhile, Emily slipped through the shadows, making her way toward the hovering vessel. She spotted a hatch on the underside of the ship and used a discarded ladder to climb up to it. With shaking hands, she pried open the panel and slipped inside. The interior of the ship was dimly lit and eerily quiet. Strange symbols glowed faintly on the walls, and the air smelled metallic. Emily crept through the narrow corridors, following the directions the alien had given her. After several minutes, she found herself standing in front of a large chamber. Inside, a massive sphere pulsed with blue light, the core system. She approached cautiously, searching for any obvious controls. Spotting a console nearby, she began pressing buttons at random, hoping to trigger something. At first, nothing happened. Then, with a loud hum, the sphere began to flicker. Alarms blared throughout the ship, and Emily knew she had succeeded. Outside, the effect was immediate. The drones froze mid-air, their lights blinking out one by one. Without their guidance, they plummeted to the ground, lifeless. Cale shouted in frustration, turning his attention back to the humans. "This is not over," he snarled, retreating toward the ship. As the vessel ascended into the sky, Jake and the others regrouped, their faces flushed with adrenaline and relief. For now, they had won. But they all knew the battle was far from finished. Back in the diner, the captured alien watched silently as the humans celebrated their victory. Though it couldn't fully understand their emotions, it recognized the spark of resilience that burned within them. Perhaps, it thought, humans truly were unlike any other species in the galaxy, and perhaps that was something worth respecting. The victory felt hollow in the days that followed. The townspeople of Willow Creek had managed to fend off the aliens, but no one believed it was over. The invaders had retreated, but they hadn't been defeated, not really. Everyone knew it. It was only a matter of time before they returned, and next time they might not be so forgiving. Jake, Emily, Ben, and Sarah gathered in the diner once again, trying to figure out their next move. The captured alien still sat in the center of the tea, room-bound and silent. Its presence was a constant reminder of the threat hanging over them, but it also represented an opportunity to learn more about their enemy and prepare for what was coming. "We need to know everything," Jake said, pacing back and forth. "Their technology, their weaknesses, their plans. Anything we can use against them." Emily nodded, sitting on the edge of a chair. "We've already learned that their drones rely on a central system. If we can disrupt that, we stand a better chance. But what about the weapons?" Sarah asked, gesturing toward the glowing rifle Cale had used during the battle. "That thing packs a punch. One shot could level half the town." Ben leaned against the counter, his arms crossed. "We need to focus on defense. Fortify the town, set up more traps, and make sure everyone knows how to fight if it comes to that." The group agreed, dividing tasks among themselves. Jake and Emily would continue interrogating the alien, hoping to extract more information. Ben and Sarah would oversee the fortifications, ensuring that Willow Creek was as prepared as possible for another attack. But as they worked, a question lingered in the back of everyone's mind. Why were these aliens so determined to conquer Earth? What made humanity such a target? Later that evening, Emily approached the alien alone. She sat down across from it, her expression calm but focused. "Why are you here?" she asked, her voice steady. "What do you want from us?" The alien tilted its head, studying her with its glowing eyes. "Your species occupies a strategic position in this region of space," it replied through the translator device. "Your planet is rich in resources. Your people are adaptable. You are valuable." "Valuable enough to destroy?" Emily pressed, her tone sharp. "You came here threatening us, demanding compliance. Why not try talking instead of forcing?" The alien hesitated, as if considering her words. "Our methods are efficient. Resistance is costly but ultimately irrelevant. Most civilizations submit willingly when faced with superior force." Emily shook her head. "You don't understand humans. We don't give up easily. Even if it costs us everything, we'll fight to protect what's ours." The alien's posture shifted slightly, its movements almost contemplative. "Your defiance intrigues me. It is unexpected." "Maybe because you underestimated us," Emily suggested. You thought we'd roll over just like everyone else, but we're different." The alien didn't respond immediately. Instead, it looked past her, its gaze distant. Finally, it spoke again. "Perhaps. Or perhaps your defiance will lead to your downfall." Emily frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means my superiors will not tolerate failure," the alien replied. "They will send reinforcements, more ships, more soldiers. Your resistance may delay the inevitable, but it cannot prevent it." A chill ran down Emily's spine. She had suspected as much, but hearing it confirmed made the reality sink in. The battle they had won was just the beginning. The real fight was yet to come. Meanwhile, Jake met with Ben and Sarah to discuss their defensive strategy. They stood in the middle of Main Street, surrounded by townspeople who were busy reinforcing barricades and setting up new traps. Jake held a map of the area, pointing out key locations. "If they come back in force, we'll need to funnel them into choke points," he explained. "Use the terrain to our advantage. Keep them guessing." Ben nodded, running a hand over his stubbled chin. "We've got trenches dug along the outskirts. If we can lure them into those, it might slow them down. And don't forget the alarms," Sarah added, gesturing toward the makeshift devices Emily had rigged up. "If we know where they're landing, we can hit them hard and fast." Jake glanced at the sky, his jaw tightening. "We'll need every trick we can think of. They'll bring more drones, more weapons. We have to be ready for anything." As the sun set, the townspeople worked tirelessly, their determination unwavering. Children helped carry supplies while elders shared stories of resilience and courage. Everyone contributed in their own way, united by a common goal: survival. That night, as the town settled into an uneasy quiet, Jake found himself staring at the stars. He sat on the roof of the diner, his rifle resting beside him. Emily joined him after a while, handing him a cup of coffee. Neither of them spoke for a long moment, the weight of the situation pressing down on them. "What happens if we lose?" Emily finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jake took a sip of his coffee, his eyes fixed on the horizon. "We don't. Not yet, anyway." "But what if they overwhelm us?" she pressed. "What if there's nothing we can do?" Jake turned to look at her, his expression resolute. "Then we go down fighting. That's what makes us human, Em. No matter how bad things get, we keep going, we don't give up." Emily smiled faintly, though her eyes still reflected doubt. "You sound like you believe that." "I do," Jake said firmly. "Because it's true. We've faced worse odds before. Humanity has always found a way to survive, and we'll do it again." The next morning, the alien ship returned. This time, it wasn't alone. 2 additional vessels hovered in the sky, their shapes sleek and menacing. Drones descended in swarms, scanning the area with red beams of light. The townspeople scrambled to their positions, gripping their weapons tightly as the invaders advanced. Cale stepped forward once again, his glowing weapon aimed directly at Jake. "Your defiance ends now," he declared, his voice cold and authoritative. "Surrender or face annihilation." Jake raised his rifle, meeting Cale's gaze without flinching. "Not a chance." With a wave of his hand, Cale signaled the attack. Drones surged forward, firing bolts of energy that tore through buildings and sent debris flying. The townspeople fought back fiercely, using every tactic they had practiced. Explosions rocked the streets as traps detonated, taking out waves of drones. But for every machine destroyed, 2 more seemed to take its place. Amid the chaos, Emily spotted something: a small shuttle detaching from one of the larger ships. It descended rapidly, landing near the edge of town. A group of armored figures emerged, carrying heavy weapons unlike anything they had seen before. "They're sending ground troops!" she shouted, grabbing Jake's arm. "We can't hold them off." Jake gritted his teeth, his mind racing. Then he remembered the alien's earlier warning. Reinforcements. They were running out of time. "We need to fall back," he said, turning to Ben and Sarah. "Regroup at the church, set up a last line of defense." Reluctantly, the group began retreating, covering each other as they moved. The aliens pursued, relentlessly, their numbers overwhelming. By the time they reached the church, the situation was dire. Barricades were crumbling, and supplies were running low. Inside the church, the captured alien watched silently as the humans prepared for what might be their final stand. For the first time, it seemed conflicted, its glowing eyes flickering uncertainly. As the battle raged outside, it spoke softly, almost to itself. Perhaps I was wrong about them. Hours later, the fighting stopped. The aliens withdrew, leaving behind a battered but defiant town. Though the cost had been high, homes destroyed, lives lost, the people of Willow Creek refused to surrender. They had proven that even in the face of impossible odds, humanity would fight to protect its freedom. And somewhere far beyond the stars, the leaders of the alien fleet received Kale's report. Among the data detailing the humans' tenacity was a single line of text. Further engagement carries significant risk. Recommend extreme caution. For the first time in their long history of conquest, the invaders hesitated. The aftermath of the battle left Willow Creek battered but unbroken. The town was scarred, buildings reduced to rubble, streets littered with debris, but the spirit of its people remained intact. Jake, Emily, Ben, and Sarah gathered in the church which had become their makeshift headquarters. Exhaustion weighed heavily on their faces, but there was also a sense of pride. They had stood their ground against overwhelming odds, and though the aliens had retreated, they knew the fight wasn't over. "We survived," Ben said, breaking the silence. His voice was hoarse from shouting orders during the battle, but his tone carried a note of defiance. "That's something. For now," Jake added grimly. He sat slumped against a pew, his rifle resting across his knees. "But we can't keep this up forever. Next time they'll bring more ships, more weapons. We're running out of tricks." Emily nodded, her eyes fixed on the floor. "We need help. More supplies, more people. Something. We can't do this alone." Sarah crossed her arms, her expression thoughtful. "What about the other towns? If we tell them what's happening, maybe they'll join us. We can't be the only ones who've seen these things." Jake considered the idea for a moment. "It's risky. If word gets out and people panic, it could make things worse, but if we don't act, we're sitting ducks." "Then we act," Ben said firmly. "We send messengers to nearby towns. Tell them everything. Show them the footage we recorded. If they see what we're up against, they'll understand." Over the next few days, the people of Willow Creek worked tirelessly to spread the word. Teams traveled to neighboring communities, sharing stories of the alien invasion and showing videos captured during the battles. At first, many were skeptical, dismissing the tales as wild rumors or outright lies. But when they saw the proof, the glowing weapons, the drones, the towering ships hovering above the horizon, they couldn't deny the truth. Word spread quickly, and soon, representatives from surrounding towns began arriving in Willow Creek. Farmers, shopkeepers, teachers, and mechanics came together, united by a shared purpose: survival. They brought food, tools, weapons, and whatever else they could spare. For the first time, the small town felt less isolated, less alone. A council was formed, with Jake and Emily acting as leaders alongside Ben and Sarah. Together, they coordinated efforts to strengthen defenses, gather intelligence, and prepare for the inevitable return of the invaders. It wasn't just Willow Creek anymore. It was a coalition, a network of determined humans ready to fight for their homes. Meanwhile, aboard the alien ship, Kale faced harsh criticism from his superiors. The transmission came through loud and clear, filled with anger and disbelief. "Your mission has failed repeatedly," Commander Zirn stated, his voice cold and mechanical. "Explain yourself." Kale stood rigid, his glowing eyes downcast. "The humans are unpredictable. Their resistance is unlike anything we've encountered before." "Unpredictable," Zirn repeated, his tone sharp. "You allowed a primitive species to disable your core systems, destroy dozens of drones, and force you to retreat. This is unacceptable." "I underestimated them," Kale admitted reluctantly. "Their adaptability and determination are remarkable." They lack advanced technology, yet they continue to resist. Zirn paused, considering the report. Perhaps we have misjudged them. Humanity may pose a greater threat than anticipated. Lyra, Kale's second-in-command, stepped forward. Commander, I recommend caution. These humans value freedom above all else. To subjugate them would require immense resources, and even then success is uncertain. Kale frowned. Are you suggesting we abandon the mission? No, Lyra replied. But we must reconsider our approach. Direct confrontation has proven costly. Perhaps negotiation implies equality, Zirn interrupted. These humans are beneath us. However, Lyra's point is valid. Further engagement carries risks. We will regroup and reassess our strategy. As the transmission ended, Kale exchanged a glance with Lyra. Both knew the commander's decision was temporary. The invasion wasn't over. It was merely delayed. Back on Earth, the coalition continued to grow. Towns across Montana joined forces, pooling resources and sharing information. Radio broadcasts reached farther communities, spreading awareness of the alien threat. People who had never met each other before became allies bound by a common cause. The movement gained momentum, fueled by stories of bravery and resilience. In Willow Creek, the captured alien remained under guard. It watched silently as the humans prepared for war, its glowing eyes reflecting a mix of curiosity and unease. One evening, Emily approached it, her expression thoughtful. You've seen how far we're willing to go, she said, kneeling beside it. Do you really think your people can win this? The alien tilted its head, studying her. My people are powerful. Your resistance will eventually falter. Maybe, Emily admitted. But not without a fight. And every fight makes you weaker. Every loss brings us closer to victory. The alien didn't respond immediately. Instead, it looked past her, its gaze distant. Finally, it spoke. You are unique. Perhaps that is why my superiors fear you. Emily frowned. Fear us? Why? Because you refuse to submit, the alien replied. Even when faced with annihilation, you persist. That is unsettling. Emily smiled faintly. Good. Maybe it'll teach you to leave us alone. Weeks turned into months, and the aliens did not return. The absence was both a relief and a source of anxiety. Everyone knew it was only a matter of time before the invaders launched another assault. In the meantime, the coalition used the reprieve to strengthen their defenses and plan for the future. Jake and Emily led training sessions, teaching newcomers how to handle weapons and set traps. Ben oversaw the construction of fortified bunkers, ensuring there were safe havens in case of attack. Sarah coordinated supply lines, making sure every town had enough food and medical supplies to last through prolonged conflict. Despite the uncertainty, there was a sense of hope. The people of Earth had proven they could unite in the face of adversity. What started as a small-town uprising had grown into a regional movement, and whispers of rebellion echoed across the country. Far beyond the stars, news of humanity's resistance reached other civilizations. Some viewed the humans as dangerous anomalies, while others admired their courage. Rumors spread of a species that refused to bow to superior forces, a species capable of standing toe-to-toe with galactic powers. On one distant planet, an elder council debated the implications of Earth's defiance. These humans are unlike any race we've encountered, one member said gravely. They do not fear death, they do not surrender. Engaging them directly would be unwise. Another elder nodded in agreement. Let this serve as a warning to all who seek conquest. Do not enrage humans. They have a special place in hell reserved for those who dare threaten their world. Back on Earth, Jake stood on a hill overlooking Willow Creek. The sun was setting, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. Emily joined him, handing him a cup of coffee. Neither spoke for a long moment, content to watch the horizon. What happens if they come back? Emily asked finally, her voice soft. They will, Jake replied. And when they do, we'll be ready. Emily smiled, her eyes reflecting determination. Yeah, we will. For the first time in months, Jake felt a flicker of optimism. Humanity might be outnumbered and outgunned, but they had something no weapon could match: heart. And as long as they stood together, they had a chance, not just to survive, but to prevail. In the distance, the stars twinkled faintly, silent witnesses to the unfolding drama. Somewhere out there, the aliens plotted their next move. But here, on Earth, the humans waited, ready to fight for their place among the stars.